I stood on the sidewalk watching my father slam our front door shut, the sound echoing through our quiet Wisconsin neighborhood like a gunshot. My 3 suitcases and 2 garbage bags full of hastily packed belongings sat around me like silent witnesses to my humiliation. The curtain in the upstairs window moved slightly, and I caught a glimpse of my sister Amanda smirking down at me. This was her victory moment. My own parents had just kicked me out of our family home, not because I had done anything wrong, but because their precious golden child convinced them I was somehow damaging her mental health just by existing. 22 years as their son meant nothing compared to Amanda's tears. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound I had ever felt. Growing up in Maple Creek, Wisconsin, I never thought I would end up homeless because my sister couldn't stand sharing our parents' attention. The Hamilton family appeared perfectly normal from the outside, a middle-class suburban household with 2 kids, a dog, and a white picket fence. My father Jack worked as a bank manager while my mother Laura taught 4th grade at the local elementary school. We were comfortable, but not wealthy, which made the disparity in how they treated Amanda and me even more obvious. The differences started small. When I was 8 and Amanda was 6, I noticed she got ice cream after falling off her bike, while I was told to toughen up when the same thing happened to me. By middle school, the pattern was unmistakable. My 12th birthday party consisted of pizza in the backyard with 3 friends. 2 months later, Amanda turned 10 and received a professionally catered party at the local country club with pony rides and a magician. "We need to make sure Amanda feels special," my mother would explain whenever I questioned the obvious favoritism. "She has a more sensitive temperament than you do, Coleman. You're our strong one, who can handle anything." Being labeled the strong one became my curse. It meant I was expected to sacrifice, understand, and never complain. When Christmas came around, Amanda would receive mountains of gifts, while I got practical items like socks and school supplies. If I showed any disappointment, my father would pull me aside. "Your sister needs more encouragement," he would say sternly. "Don't be selfish." I tried everything to earn their approval. I maintained a 4.0 GPA throughout high school, joined the debate team, and won state competitions. I mowed the lawn without being asked, and fixed things around the house. I worked summer jobs at the local grocery store to save for college, while Amanda spent her summers lounging by the community pool. Yet nothing I accomplished seemed to matter compared to Amanda simply existing. The summer before I left for college revealed how deep the favoritism ran. I had been accepted to State University with a partial academic scholarship, but would still need to work part-time jobs to cover the remaining tuition and living expenses. "College is expensive," my father explained as we reviewed my financial aid package at the kitchen table. "You'll need to be responsible for the rest. It builds character." I nodded, having expected nothing less. I had already lined up a job at the campus bookstore and was prepared to take out modest student loans. 2 weeks later, I overheard my parents discussing Amanda's future college plans, though she was still 2 years away from graduation and maintained a C average at best. "We should start looking at private universities," my mother said excitedly. "I think Amanda would thrive in a smaller, more nurturing environment. Of course, they're more expensive, but we can tap into our retirement fund if necessary." My father agreed without hesitation. "She deserves the best education we can provide. We'll make it work financially." The obvious double standards stung, but some foolish part of me still held on to hope that someday my parents would see me equally. That maybe once we were all adults, the playing field would finally level out. Looking back now, I realize how naive that hope truly was. Amanda mastered the art of manipulation early, learning that tears and claims of anxiety could get her whatever she wanted. If we argued, she would cry until my parents swooped in to rescue her, automatically assuming I was at fault. She became increasingly skilled at playing the victim while painting me as the aggressor. Coleman made me feel stupid again. She would sob, twisting my words beyond recognition. Or Coleman doesn't want me around his friends because he's embarrassed by me, when in reality, I had simply asked for some privacy. By the time I left for college, the pattern was firmly established. Amanda was the fragile, special one who needed protection. I was the problem that needed to be managed. Still, I clung to the belief that physical distance might improve our relationship. Perhaps absence really would make their hearts grow fonder. I could not have been more wrong. State University brought my first taste of freedom from the suffocating family dynamic. My roommate, Jason, came from a large, boisterous family where siblings were treated equally, and through him, I began to understand just how abnormal my home life had been. We shared a cramped dorm room with cinder-block walls and twin beds that felt luxurious compared to the emotional confines of my childhood home. "Dude, that's messed up," Jason said one night after I described how my parents had called to tell me they couldn't attend my honors society induction because Amanda had a minor cold. My parents would never play favorites like that. I shrugged, uncomfortable with his outrage on my behalf. "They just worry about her more. They should worry about treating their kids fairly," he countered. "You deserve better." Those 4 words hit me hard. You deserve better. No one had ever suggested that before. Despite my parents' lack of financial support, I thrived academically. I double-majored in business and marketing, maintained my scholarship, and worked 20 hours weekly at the campus bookstore and another 10 as a research assistant. My schedule was punishing, but the sense of accomplishment was worth the exhaustion. Meanwhile, Amanda graduated high school with unremarkable grades, but was rewarded with a brand new car and full tuition to a private college, 3 hours from our hometown. During her first semester, my parents proudly reported she had joined a sorority and was focusing on the social aspects of college since networking is so important these days. Holiday breaks became dreaded obligations. I would return home eager to share my achievements, only to be sidelined by whatever drama Amanda had manufactured. During Thanksgiving break of my junior year, I arrived home excited to tell everyone about winning a prestigious marketing competition. "That's nice," my mother said distractedly after my announcement at dinner. "Amanda, tell Coleman about your new boyfriend. His father owns that big construction company in Milwaukee." Amanda launched into a detailed account of her relationship, while I silently pushed food around my plate. Later that night, as I was helping with dishes, Amanda cornered me in the kitchen. "Nobody likes a show-off," she whispered, making sure our parents couldn't overhear. "All your achievements just make the rest of us feel bad about ourselves. Maybe try being normal for once." I stepped back, stunned by the naked hostility in her eyes. "I'm just sharing what's happening in my life, Amanda. That's what families do." "Well, maybe share less," she snapped before flouncing out of the kitchen. The next morning, I found Amanda tearfully telling our parents that my success made her feel inadequate and depressed. My mother immediately wrapped her in a hug. "Coleman," my father said sternly, "we need to be more sensitive to your sister's feelings. Not everyone can be an academic superstar." I stood frozen, unable to comprehend how sharing good news had somehow become an act of cruelty. That was the moment I truly understood that in our family dynamic, my success would always be treated as Amanda's failure. There was no winning. The spring semester of my junior year brought an unexpected bright spot into my life. I met Sarah in an advanced marketing class where we were paired for a group project. Smart, perceptive, and genuinely kind, she noticed immediately when I downplayed my ideas during our first meeting. "Why do you do that?" she asked, as we walked across campus together. "Do what?" "Apologize for your opinions. You started every sentence with, 'This might be stupid,' but when actually your ideas were the strongest ones in the group." I felt my face grow hot. Habit, I guess. Sarah's directness was refreshing after years of walking on eggshells around my family. We began studying together, which evolved into coffee dates, and eventually a relationship that gave me my first experience of being valued simply for being myself. After meeting my family during Parents' Weekend, Sarah pointed out patterns I had normalized. "Your sister interrupted you 17 times during dinner, and your parents never once redirected the conversation back to you," she observed. "And did you notice how she suddenly developed a headache when your professor stopped by to praise your work?" "That's just how Amanda is," I said automatically. Sarah took my hand. "Coleman, that's how she chooses to be. There's a difference." With Sarah's perspective, I began seeing my family dynamics more clearly, though I still harbored hope that things would improve. After all, we were adults now. Surely the childish competition would fade with maturity. This hope sustained me through my senior year as I applied for jobs and prepared to enter the real world, blissfully unaware that the worst betrayal was yet to come. My graduation from State University should have been one of the proudest days of my life. I had maintained a 3.9 GPA while working nearly full-time, secured a promising position at Midwest Marketing Solutions, and was preparing to start my adult life with real optimism. Sarah sat with my family during the ceremony, her presence a lifeline amid the undercurrents of tension. As we gathered for photos afterward, Amanda complained loudly about how long the ceremony had been and how uncomfortable the seats were. My mother fussed over her, while my father checked his watch repeatedly. "We should get going," he announced as I posed for a picture with my academic advisor. "We have reservations at 1, and Amanda's getting hungry." My advisor raised her eyebrows but said nothing as my family began walking toward the parking lot. Sarah squeezed my hand supportively. "They're just being themselves," I whispered, the familiar excuse sounding hollow even to my own ears. "That doesn't make it okay," she replied. The restaurant my parents had chosen was upscale, the kind of place that would normally be reserved for Amanda's achievements. My father ordered an expensive bottle of champagne, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe it was in celebration of my accomplishment. "A toast," he said, raising his glass. "To both our children pursuing their dreams, and especially to Amanda, who just informed us this morning that she's decided to change her major to communications. Her 5th change shows her commitment to finding her true passion." I nearly choked on my water. Amanda had been in college for 3 years and had cycled through majors in psychology, business, art history, and English, completing barely enough credits to maintain sophomore standing. Meanwhile, the fact that I had just graduated with honors and secured employment received only a passing mention. "What about Coleman's new job?" Sarah asked pointedly. "That seems toast-worthy, too." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table before my mother replied, "Of course, we're very proud of Coleman, too." The lukewarm acknowledgement hung in the air like stale smoke. Amanda quickly redirected the conversation to her sorority's summer plans, and the moment passed. 2 weeks later, after moving into a small apartment and starting my new job, I received a concerning call from my mother. "Amanda's home for the summer," she said without preamble. "She's going through a difficult time. She broke up with her boyfriend and has decided to take a break from college to reassess her priorities." "A break?" I asked carefully. "You mean she's dropping out?" "Don't be judgmental, Coleman. She's being mature by recognizing she needs time to figure things out." I bit back the obvious point that my parents had funded 4 years of figuring things out with nothing to show for it. "Is she planning to work during this break?" The silence on the other end of the line was telling. "Your father and I feel she needs time to focus on her mental health, without additional pressures." Translation: Amanda would be lounging around the house indefinitely while my parents continued funding her lifestyle. Something in me finally snapped. "Mom, don't you think that enabling her like this is actually hurting Amanda in the long run? Maybe what she needs is some structure and responsibility." My mother gasped as if I'd suggested something truly horrible. "I can't believe you would say such a thing when your sister is suffering. This is exactly the kind of judgmental attitude that makes her feel worse about herself." The conversation devolved from there, ending with my mother angrily hanging up. Sarah found me staring at my phone in disbelief. "I think I just became the family villain for suggesting Amanda might benefit from having a job," I said. 2 days later, my father called demanding I come home for a family meeting. Despite Sarah's concerns, I made the 3-hour drive back to Maple Creek, hoping against hope that maybe this time would be different. I arrived to find my parents and Amanda sitting solemnly in the living room as if staging an intervention. Amanda's eyes were red and swollen from crying, while my parents wore matching expressions of disappointment. "Coleman," my father began gravely, "Amanda has shared some concerning things with us. She says she's always felt bullied and judged by you, and that your critical attitude has contributed significantly to her anxiety issues." I stared at him in disbelief. "Bullied? Dad, when have I ever bullied Amanda?" "See?" Amanda wailed. "He's denying it and making me seem crazy. This is exactly what he always does." My mother rushed to her side. "It's okay, sweetheart. We believe you." "This is insane," I said, looking between my parents. "I just suggested that having some responsibility might actually help Amanda feel better about herself. How is that bullying?" "It's your constant judgment," Amanda sobbed. "You've always thought you were better than me with your perfect grades and your job. You have no idea what it's like living in your shadow." The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. I had spent my entire life in Amanda's shadow, watching her receive endless support and praise for doing absolutely nothing, while my achievements were minimized or ignored entirely. "I think we all need to consider family counseling," I suggested, desperately trying to find a productive solution. "This dynamic isn't healthy for any of us." My suggestion landed like a bomb. Amanda's sobs escalated to near hysteria, while my parents looked at me as if I had suggested something truly offensive. "Are you saying there's something wrong with our family?" my father demanded. "I'm saying we could benefit from an objective perspective," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "The problem isn't our family, Coleman," my mother said coldly. "The problem is your inability to be supportive of your sister." "Supportive?" I laughed bitterly. "I've spent my entire life being pushed aside so Amanda could be the center of attention. I worked through college while you fully funded her to fail repeatedly. And now I'm the unsupportive one because I suggested maybe, just maybe, she should face some consequences for her choices." "I can't handle this," Amanda cried, running from the room. "I'll never get better with him attacking me like this." My parents watched her go, then turned to me with identical expressions of disappointment. "I think you should leave," my father said quietly. "We need to focus on helping Amanda right now, and your presence is clearly making things worse." I left in a daze, the full weight of what had just happened still sinking in. As I drove back to my apartment, I called Sarah and recounted the surreal confrontation. "They've chosen her," I concluded, my voice hollow. "They've always chosen her, but now it's explicit." "Come home," Sarah said gently. "Your real home, with me. We'll figure this out together." I had no idea then that figuring it out would involve being completely cut off from my family, or that the worst was yet to come. "We've made a difficult decision." My mother's voice on the phone sounded distant and formal, as if she were speaking to a stranger rather than her son. It had been 3 weeks since the disastrous family meeting. 3 weeks of unanswered calls and mounting anxiety. "Amanda needs space to heal, and your presence, even just knowing you might call or visit, is triggering her anxiety. We think it's best if we take a break from contact for a while." The word break hung in the air, innocent sounding yet devastating in its implications. My throat constricted as I struggled to form a response. "How long is a while, Mom?" she sighed, the sound crackling through the connection. "We can't put a timeline on Amanda's recovery. Your father is going to drop off the rest of your belongings this weekend. We've packed everything up for you." The finality in her voice made my stomach lurch. "You're packing up my room? My childhood mementos? Everything? It's for the best, Coleman. Amanda can't move forward with constant reminders of you around the house." I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "So I'm being erased. Just like that." "Don't be dramatic," she replied coldly. "This isn't about you. It's about what Amanda needs right now. But it was about me. It was about my parents choosing to cut off their son to appease their daughter's irrational demands. It was about being discarded after 22 years of trying to be good enough. After we hung up, I sat motionless on my second-hand couch for hours, trying to process the brutal reality that I no longer had a family. Saturday morning found me standing in my parents' driveway as my father silently unloaded boxes from his SUV. Neighbors peered curiously from behind curtains, witnessing my humiliation. I caught a glimpse of Amanda watching from her bedroom window, her expression unreadable from a distance. "Is there anything else you need to get from inside?" my father asked stiffly, avoiding eye contact. "Am I even allowed inside?" I countered, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. He flinched slightly. "It would be better if you didn't, for Amanda's sake." "Right, Amanda's sake. The only sake that's ever mattered in this family." My father's face hardened. "That's exactly the kind of attitude that caused this situation, Coleman. Your sister deserves peace and healing. And what do I deserve, Dad? To be thrown away like garbage?" He didn't answer, just handed me a box labeled Coleman's desk and turned back toward the house. I noticed my mother peeking out from the kitchen window, but she quickly disappeared when our eyes met. Neither of them said goodbye. I methodically loaded the boxes into my car and Sarah's borrowed SUV, each one feeling heavier than the last. 22 years of existence reduced to cardboard containers, neatly labeled and removed like inconvenient clutter. When I opened one marked childhood, I found all my sports trophies, academic awards, and framed photos had been hastily dumped together, several items broken in the process. The symbolic carelessness cut deeper than words could express. Back at my apartment, Sarah helped me unpack the essentials while the rest remained stacked in my small living room, physical reminders of my rejection. We worked mostly in silence, the magnitude of what had happened too overwhelming for conversation. That night, as Sarah slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, feeling a hollowness expand inside my chest. I had lost not only my past but also my understanding of who I was. If my own parents could discard me so easily, what did that say about my worth as a person? The question haunted me as I drifted into restless sleep. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of grief and confusion. I went through the motions at my new job, but my performance suffered as depression settled over me like a heavy fog. Sarah tried to help, but there was a fundamental wound that her love couldn't heal. I stopped answering calls from extended family members, unable to bear their questions or, worse, their silence if they had already accepted Amanda's version of events. My Aunt Judy left several voicemails, her concern evident in her voice. "Coleman, honey, we're worried about you. Please call me back." But I couldn't face explaining that my parents had chosen Amanda's comfort over my existence. The shame felt too overwhelming. By Thanksgiving, I had lost 15 pounds, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame. Sarah convinced me to spend the holiday with her family in Michigan rather than alone in my apartment. Her parents welcomed me warmly, making space for me at their table without prying into the painful details of my situation. The normalcy of their family interactions both comforted and pained me, highlighting everything I had lost. "They don't deserve you," Sarah whispered as we lay in her childhood bedroom that night. "Someday they'll realize what they've thrown away." I wanted to believe her, but the rejection had shattered something fundamental in my understanding of love and family. If the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally could cut you off without a backward glance, then what security could ever exist in relationships? The question plagued me as winter settled over the Midwest, bringing holidays I would spend as an exile from my own family. Christmas cards arrived addressed only to Sarah, though she lived in her own apartment across town. My parents had gone so far as to remove me from their holiday mailing list. When Sarah's card arrived containing a family newsletter that mentioned Amanda's brave journey of self-discovery, but contained no reference to me whatsoever, I finally accepted the completeness of my erasure. In the story my family now told about themselves, I simply didn't exist. January brought snow and a new depth of isolation. I declined invitations from coworkers, withdrew from friends, and would have retreated from Sarah too if not for her gentle persistence. My work performance continued to suffer, leading to a warning from my supervisor about my lack of engagement. Everything that had once mattered to me now seemed pointless in the face of such profound rejection. "I think you should talk to someone professional," Sarah suggested carefully one evening after I'd spent hours staring blankly at the television. "This isn't something you can just push through on your own." Her words penetrated the fog of my depression enough to recognize their truth. The following week, I sat across from Dr. Brenner, a therapist specializing in family trauma, and began the painful process of untangling a lifetime of dysfunctional patterns and conditional love. It would be the first step on a long journey back to myself, though I couldn't see that yet through the darkness that enveloped me. I was examining avocados in the produce section of Hilltop Grocery when I spotted Diane Peterson, my mother's best friend since college. My first instinct was to abandon my shopping cart and flee, but she had already noticed me. To my surprise, instead of the awkward avoidance I expected, she approached with concern evident in her expression. "Coleman," she said softly, "how are you holding up?" The genuine compassion in her voice nearly undid me. It had been 6 months since my exile from the family, 6 months of rebuilding my life from the ground up. I struggled to find an appropriate response that wouldn't reveal the depth of my ongoing pain. "I'm managing," I replied, the words feeling inadequate. "Work keeps me busy." Diane glanced around before lowering her voice. "I've been worried about you. The things Amanda has been saying since you've been gone, they're getting more and more outlandish. I wanted to believe her at first, for your mother's sake, but it's gone too far." My stomach clenched. "What kinds of things?" "She started with claims that you were verbally abusive throughout childhood, which surprised me since I've known you since you were a baby. But recently, she's escalated to accusations that you threatened her physically before you left. She's convincing your parents she needs expensive therapy because of supposed trauma you caused." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not content with merely removing me from the family, Amanda was now actively destroying my reputation with fabricated abuse claims. The magnitude of her manipulation was staggering. "That's completely false," I said, my voice shaking. "I never threatened Amanda. Ever." Diane nodded, her eyes sad. "I know, Coleman. I've watched Amanda manipulate situations since she was little. Remember when she claimed you pushed her off the swing set and broke her arm? I was there that day. She fell because she was trying to stand up on the swing after your mother told her not to. I remembered all too well. I had been grounded for 2 weeks despite my protests of innocence. My parents never questioned why I would suddenly push my sister for no reason, simply accepting her tears as evidence of my guilt. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Diane sighed heavily. "Because I've stayed silent too long out of loyalty to your mother. I've watched Amanda twist reality my entire life, and I've watched your parents enable it at your expense. What they're doing now, cutting you off completely, it's wrong. And someone needed to tell you that you're not crazy." Those words, "you're not crazy," broke something open inside me. Tears sprang to my eyes in the middle of the produce section as the validation I had desperately needed finally came, albeit from an unexpected source. "Thank you," I managed, quickly wiping my eyes. "Your parents are making a terrible mistake," Diane continued. "Someday they'll realize that, but by then it might be too late. Just know that not everyone believes Amanda's stories." After we parted ways, I sat in my car in the grocery store parking lot, Diane's revelations tumbling through my mind. All these months, I had been carrying the weight of my family's rejection as evidence of my unworthiness. But what if the problem had never been me at all? What if I had spent my entire life trying to earn love from people who were incapable of seeing past Amanda's manipulations? That evening, I recounted the conversation to both Sarah and Dr. Brenner during our weekly session. Dr. Brenner leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "How does knowing about Amanda's escalating lies change things for you, Coleman?" I considered the question carefully. It helps me see that this isn't about my worth as a person. It's about a family system that's fundamentally broken. Amanda needs me to be the villain in her story, and my parents need to believe her to justify their choices. That's an important insight, Dr. Brenner nodded. The question now becomes, what do you want to do with this information? What I wanted, I realized, was to reclaim my narrative. For months, I had allowed Amanda's version of events to define me, had carried the shame of rejection as if it were proof of my defectiveness. But if her accusations were fabricated, then the shame belonged to her and my parents, not to me. I want to document everything, I said suddenly. Every instance of favoritism, every manipulation, every lie. Not to confront them with it, but for myself. So I never forget the reality of what happened. Sarah squeezed my hand supportively. That sounds like a healthy way to process everything. That night, I began journaling, starting with my earliest memories of differential treatment and working forward chronologically. The process was painful but cathartic, bringing clarity to patterns I had normalized throughout childhood. I recorded specific incidents, dates where possible, and the emotional impact each event had on me. What emerged was a clear documentation of systematic favoritism and emotional neglect spanning 2 decades. They weren't bad parents in the traditional sense, I told Sarah as we reviewed what I had written. They provided for my physical needs, supported my education to a point. They just gave Amanda everything emotionally while leaving nothing for me. That's still neglect, Sarah pointed out gently. Emotional neglect is real, Coleman. Just because they didn't hit you doesn't mean you weren't harmed. As winter melted into spring, I continued the journal, while focusing on rebuilding my life. With Dr. Brenner's guidance, I established firm boundaries with extended family, sharing my perspective with those willing to listen. Some, like my Aunt Judy and Uncle Mike, expressed shock at my parents' decision and offered their continued support. Others chose to believe Amanda's version, unable or unwilling to question the family narrative. The emotional validation from those who did believe me helped heal some of the raw wounds of rejection. Even more healing was the unconditional acceptance I found in Sarah's family. Her parents invited me for Sunday dinners and included me in family events without hesitation. Her father, Tom, a contractor by trade, took me under his wing, teaching me home repair skills during weekend projects. These moments of normal family interaction slowly rebuilt my sense of belonging in the world. At work, I refocused my energy, channeling my pain into productivity. My supervisor noticed the change, commenting on my remarkable turnaround and assigning me to higher profile accounts. By June, I had received a modest promotion and raise, allowing me to move from my depressing studio apartment to a more comfortable 1-bedroom unit in a safer neighborhood. Throughout this period of rebuilding, I maintained the no contact my parents had initiated, though the silence remained painful. Holidays and birthdays passed without acknowledgement, each one a reminder of what had been lost. I occasionally heard updates through mutual connections that Amanda had begun and quit several jobs, continuing to live at home while my parents supported her financially and emotionally. "Do you miss them?" Sarah asked one night as we lay in my new apartment, moonlight streaming through the blinds. "I miss who I wanted them to be," I answered after a long pause. "I miss the parents I deserved but never had. But the actual people they are? I'm not sure those people are worth missing." It was a harsh realization but an honest one. The parents who had discarded me so easily were not the loving, supportive figures I had spent my life trying to please. They were flawed individuals who had made a choice that said more about their limitations than my worth. Accepting this truth was painful but necessary for my healing. As summer progressed, I began building what Dr. Brenner called a chosen family of close friends and supportive connections. Jason from college reconnected during a business trip to Milwaukee and became a regular visitor. Sarah's circle of friends welcomed me without reservation. My coworker Alicia and her husband invited us to their backyard barbecues and game nights. Slowly, I constructed a social network based on genuine care rather than biological obligation. Family isn't just about blood. Dr. Brenner reminded me during a particularly difficult session. It's about who shows up for you consistently, who sees you clearly, and values you anyway. You're building that now, Coleman. It's different from what you lost, but no less real or important. I was beginning to believe her when a frantic call from Aunt Judy shattered the fragile peace I had established. My father had suffered a massive heart attack and was in critical condition at Maple Creek Memorial Hospital. Despite everything that had happened, despite the rejection and pain, I found myself getting in my car without hesitation, driving through the night toward the family that had thrown me away. Whether this was love or just deeply ingrained conditioning, I couldn't say. All I knew was that I had to go. The fluorescent lights of Maple Creek Memorial Hospital cast everything in a sickly green pallor as I rushed through the automatic doors toward the cardiac care unit. Aunt Judy had given me minimal information beyond the basics. Massive heart attack, emergency surgery, critical but stable condition. My mind raced with questions and tangled emotions as I approached the information desk. "Jack Hamilton," I said breathlessly to the receptionist. "I'm his son." A sentence I had no legal reason to question, yet one that felt uncertain in my mouth after months of exile from the family. The receptionist directed me to the third-floor waiting area, where I found my mother slumped in an uncomfortable chair, her face gray with exhaustion and fear. She looked older than I remembered, the stress of the situation etched into new lines around her eyes and mouth. Our eyes met across the sterile space, and for a moment neither of us moved. Then, surprising us both, I crossed the distance between us. "How is he?" I asked, my voice softening despite the complicated feelings churning inside me. "Triple bypass surgery," she replied mechanically. "They say he's stabilized, but the next 48 hours are critical." He had been having symptoms for weeks, but ignored them. Typical dad, I thought, but didn't say. Always pushing through, ignoring warning signs until crisis forced his hand. A family pattern if ever there was one. "Where's Amanda?" I asked, noticing her absence. My mother's face tightened. "She's in Cancun. Girls' trip with her sorority sisters. We've been trying to reach her, but she's not answering her phone." The information hung between us like a physical presence. My father was fighting for his life, and the daughter they had chosen over me was unreachable on a beach vacation she likely hadn't paid for herself. The irony might have been satisfying if the circumstances weren't so dire. "Have you eaten anything?" I asked, changing the subject. When she shook her head, I went to the hospital cafeteria and returned with sandwiches and coffee, falling easily into the caretaker role I had occupied since childhood. A doctor emerged to update us on my father's condition, speaking in the measured tones medical professionals use to convey serious information without causing panic. The surgery had gone as well as could be expected, but my father's recovery would be lengthy and challenging. He would need significant lifestyle changes, medication management, and consistent support during rehabilitation. "It's crucial that he has a strong support system at home," the doctor emphasized, looking between us. "Cardiac recovery is as much about reducing stress and creating a healthy environment as it is about physical healing." My mother nodded numbly, clearly overwhelmed by the implications. After the doctor left, she turned to me with naked vulnerability in her eyes. "I don't know how I'm going to manage all this," she admitted. "The medication schedule, the dietary restrictions, the follow-up appointments." The unspoken plea hung in the air between us. Despite everything that had happened, despite being cut off and cast out, she needed me now. The realization brought a complex mix of emotions: vindication, bitterness, but also an unexpected compassion. This woman had failed me in fundamental ways, yet seeing her so diminished and afraid stirred something protective in me still. "I'll help," I said simply, the words emerging before I had fully processed them. "I can take some time off work, stay for a few weeks until he's stabilized." Relief flooded her face, quickly followed by what might have been shame. "Coleman, I don't have the right to ask that of you after everything. You didn't ask. I offered. I kept my tone neutral, unwilling to make this moment easier for her, but also unwilling to abandon my father when he needed support most. This isn't about our relationship. It's about Dad's health. The boundaries felt important to articulate, both for her and for myself. I wasn't returning to resume my old role as the family doormat. This was a choice I was making on my terms, with clear limits and expectations. The next days fell into an exhausting rhythm of hospital visits, consultations with medical staff, and preparing my parents' home for my father's eventual discharge. I slept in a hotel rather than my old bedroom, maintaining physical as well as emotional distance. Sarah drove up on weekends, her presence a grounding force amid the swirling tensions of family dynamics. Amanda finally returned from Cancun 5 days after my father's heart attack, tanned and defensive, when questioned about her delayed response to family emergency calls. My phone died, and then I couldn't get good reception, she explained with practiced martyrdom. Do you think I wouldn't have come immediately if I'd known? I'm traumatized that this happened while I was away. I watched my mother comfort Amanda, as if she were the victim in this scenario, the familiar dynamic reasserting itself even in crisis. Yet something had shifted subtly. For the first time, I detected a faint hesitation in my mother's response, a flicker of recognition at the self-centeredness of Amanda's reaction. As my father recovered enough for discharge, I coordinated with hospital staff, arranged home health care visits, organized his medications, and prepared detailed schedules for his care. Amanda made appearances at the hospital but always found reasons to leave when practical matters needed attention. Her primary contribution was posting dramatic updates on social media, positioning herself as the devoted daughter keeping vigil by her father's bedside, despite spending minimal time there in reality. My extended family noticed the discrepancy between Amanda's public performance and my quiet, consistent presence. Aunt Judy pulled me aside in the hospital corridor one afternoon, her expression serious. Your parents are seeing the difference, Coleman, she said quietly. They may not be ready to admit it, but they see who's actually showing up when it matters. I shrugged, unwilling to hope for recognition that had been withheld my entire life. I'm not doing this for their approval. I know, she replied. That's what makes it so powerful. The day my father came home from the hospital, the tension in the house was palpable. I had established a temporary office in the dining room, where I could work remotely while overseeing his care. Amanda flitted in and out, making grand gestures like buying flowers or specialty foods my father couldn't eat on his restricted diet, then disappearing when it came time for the unglamorous work of helping him shower or managing his pain medication. My mother watched this pattern unfold with increasing discomfort, her eyes following Amanda's theatrical exits and my quiet returns to handle whatever task she had abandoned. Something was shifting in her perception, though neither of us acknowledged it directly. 2 weeks into my father's recovery, Amanda announced she had been offered a job opportunity in Portland that she simply couldn't pass up. The timing was transparently convenient, allowing her to escape the demanding reality of caretaking just as our father was beginning the hardest part of his rehabilitation. It's such bad timing, she lamented dramatically over dinner, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. You understand, right, Dad? My father, still weak but improving daily, gave her the automatic absolution she sought. Of course, sweetheart. You have to pursue your dreams. I kept my expression neutral, though the double standard stung even after all this time. No one had encouraged me to pursue dreams that might take me away from family responsibilities. But I was no longer the desperate child seeking approval, and I recognized Amanda's announcement for what it was, an escape from accountability, not a career move. Later that night, as I was preparing my father's evening medications, my mother joined me in the kitchen, her movements hesitant. Amanda's leaving will make things more difficult, she said, arranging pill bottles unnecessarily. I don't know how we would manage without your help, Coleman. It was the closest thing to gratitude she had expressed since my return. I measured out pills carefully before responding. "I'm not staying indefinitely," I reminded her. "I told my boss I needed 4 weeks for a family emergency. That gives you 2 more weeks to arrange longer-term care or learn to manage the regimen yourselves." She nodded, disappointment evident in the slump of her shoulders. "Of course. You have your own life. We've already asked too much." The "we" caught my attention, a subtle acknowledgement that my parents recognized they were requesting help from the son they had discarded. It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was a crack in the carefully constructed narrative they had built to justify cutting me out. After Amanda left for Portland, making a production of her departure while contributing nothing to the actual preparations, the household atmosphere shifted noticeably. Without her constant drama and demands for attention, my parents seemed almost disoriented, as if suddenly awakening in an unfamiliar landscape. The dynamic they had maintained for decades had been disrupted, first by crisis, and now by Amanda's characteristic abandonment when needed most. In this strange new configuration, I found space to interact with my parents as an adult rather than the family scapegoat. My father, physically weakened but mentally sharp, began asking about my job, my apartment, my life in Milwaukee. Simple questions that would have been normal from any parent but felt revolutionary coming from him. "Sarah seems like a wonderful young woman," he commented one afternoon as we watched a baseball game on TV, an activity that would have been impossible in Amanda's presence. "You two serious?" "Yes," I replied, surprised by his interest. "She's the best thing that's ever happened to me." He nodded thoughtfully. "Good. You deserve someone who recognizes your worth." The words hung between us, laden with implications neither of us was ready to address directly. Had my father finally recognized that he and my mother had failed to see my worth? Or was this just a throwaway comment with no deeper meaning? I couldn't ask. Not yet, but I tucked the moment away as evidence that perhaps, in some small way, perspectives were shifting. As my allotted 4 weeks drew to a close, I trained my parents in managing medications, diet restrictions, and the exercises prescribed by the physical therapist. My mother took detailed notes, approaching the task with a seriousness I had never seen her apply to anything related to my needs or interests. "You're good at this," she observed as I demonstrated how to check my father's blood pressure. "Very patient, very clear." "I've had practice explaining complex things simply through my work," I replied, though we both knew my patience had been honed through years of being overlooked and undervalued in this very house. The evening before my planned departure, several extended family members gathered for dinner, a small celebration of my father's improving health. Uncle Mike raised his glass in a toast that caught me off guard. "To Coleman," he said firmly, "who showed us all what family really means by stepping up when it mattered most, despite every reason not to." The acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes as murmurs of agreement circled the table. For the first time in my life, my contribution to the family had been publicly recognized and valued. The fact that it had taken a near tragedy to make this possible was both sad and illuminating. Later that night, as I packed my belongings in the hotel room, Sarah called to check on my preparations for returning home tomorrow. "How are you feeling about leaving?" she asked perceptively. I considered the question carefully. Mixed. Part of me is ready to get back to our life together. But there's something unresolved here, some conversation that needs to happen but hasn't yet. "Do you think it will?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm not staying longer waiting for it. They know where to find me if they're ever ready to talk honestly about what happened." As I spoke the words, I realized they represented a fundamental shift in my perspective. For the first time, I was placing responsibility where it belonged on my parents, to acknowledge their actions and initiate repair if they wanted a relationship with me. I was no longer the child desperately trying to earn love that should have been freely given. The recognition felt like setting down a burden I had carried for far too long. "I'm proud of you," Sarah said softly. "Whatever happens with them, you've shown incredible strength and character through all of this." Her words warmed me more than any approval from my parents ever had, because they came from someone who saw me clearly and loved me anyway. As I finished packing, I felt a growing certainty that regardless of what transpired with my family of origin, I had begun building something healthier and more authentic with the family of my choosing. 2 months after returning to Milwaukee, I received a text message that made my heart race. "Coleman, your father and I would like to have dinner with you this Saturday. Just us, no Amanda. Please let us know if you're available." Mom. I stared at my phone screen, emotions swirling as I processed the implications. This would be the first time seeing my parents since leaving Maple Creek after my father's recovery. The first initiative they had taken to connect with me in over a year. More significantly, the explicit mention that Amanda wouldn't be present suggested this wasn't a casual social invitation. "What do you think?" I asked Sarah, showing her the message. She considered it thoughtfully. "I think they've had time to reflect on who actually showed up when they needed someone. But the question is, are you ready to hear whatever they want to say?" It was the right question. Was I emotionally prepared to face my parents without the buffer of my father's medical crisis? What were my expectations and boundaries for such a meeting? I spent the day contemplating before responding with a simple confirmation and suggesting a restaurant on neutral ground midway between our locations. Saturday arrived with a mixture of apprehension and cautious hope. I arrived at Riverfront Grill early, choosing a quiet corner table where we wouldn't be overheard. My parents entered together, my father looking considerably healthier than when I'd left him, but moving with the caution of someone who had faced his mortality. My mother appeared nervous, clutching her purse with white knuckles as they approached. The initial greetings were awkward, filled with superficial observations about the restaurant decor and the unseasonably warm weather. We ordered drinks and appetizers, maintaining the pretense of normalcy until the server departed. Then my father cleared his throat, his expression more serious than I had seen it outside a hospital room. "Coleman," he began, his voice steady but quieter than his usual confident tone. "Your mother and I asked you here because we owe you an apology. A significant one." The directness caught me off guard. I had prepared for excuses, for minimization, for the familiar patterns of emotional avoidance, not for this straightforward acknowledgement. "What happened last year, asking you to leave our family, was wrong," my mother continued, her eyes glistening. "There's no justification for cutting off our son, no matter what we told ourselves at the time." I remained silent, allowing them the space to continue without offering easy absolution. This moment had been too long coming for me to smooth it over prematurely. When I was lying in that hospital bed, my father said, thinking I might die, I had a lot of time to reflect on my life and my regrets. Pushing you away for Amanda's comfort was at the top of that list. Watching you return to help us despite how we had treated you, that showed me what character really looks like. "We've enabled Amanda's behavior her entire life," my mother admitted, dabbing at her eyes. "Made excuses for her, prioritized her demands, allowed her to manipulate situations. It was easier than confronting the truth that our parenting was creating harm." The frankness of her self-assessment stunned me into continued silence. These were insights I had never expected my parents to reach, let alone articulate openly. "When Amanda left for Portland in the middle of my recovery," my father continued, "it was impossible to ignore the contrast between your selfless help and her self-centered departure. We've had some difficult conversations since then about the family dynamic we created." "Where is Amanda now?" I asked, finally finding my voice. My parents exchanged glances. "Still in Portland, supposedly. She calls when she needs money, which has been increasingly frequent. We've started saying no, which has resulted in some ugly conversations." I nodded, unsurprised. Without my presence as the family scapegoat, Amanda's patterns would naturally become more obvious and problematic. Setting boundaries with her now was probably painful but necessary for all involved. "We don't expect you to forgive us immediately," my mother said. "Or maybe ever. What we did was inexcusable. But we wanted you to know that we recognize our failure as parents, not just in that final decision, but in the years of unequal treatment that preceded it. We'd like a chance to rebuild a relationship with you, my father added. On your terms, whatever those might be. We know we have to earn back your trust. The meal that followed was unlike any interaction I had ever had with my parents. For perhaps the first time, they listened more than they spoke, asked genuine questions about my life and experiences, and refrained from making excuses for past behavior. They inquired about Sarah with genuine interest, expressing hope they might someday have the opportunity to know her better if I decided to allow them back into my life. We've started seeing a family therapist, my mother shared as we finished dessert. Initially for help processing everything with your father's health crisis, but increasingly to understand how we got to a point where cutting off our son seemed acceptable. That's good, I replied cautiously. I've been seeing someone too. It's been helpful for recognizing unhealthy patterns. As we prepared to leave, my father hesitated, then asked the question that clearly weighed on both their minds. Would you consider family counseling with us, Coleman? Not right away, but perhaps when you're ready. We want to do the work to heal this rift if you're willing to give us that chance. I considered his request carefully. The past year had taught me the importance of protecting myself from toxic family dynamics, but it had also shown me my capacity for growth and forgiveness. The parents sitting across from me were not the same people who had dismissed me from their lives a year ago. They had begun a process of recognition and accountability that deserved acknowledgement. I'm not ready for that yet, I answered honestly. But I'm not closing the door on the possibility. I need to see consistent change over time before I can consider family therapy. They nodded, accepting my boundary without protest. As we parted in the parking lot, my mother reached tentatively for a hug which I returned briefly, the first physical contact we had shared since before my exile. It felt strange but not entirely unwelcome, like reconnecting with a distant relative rather than a parent. Driving home, I called Sarah to recount the unexpected nature of the meeting. They actually apologized, I said, still processing the reality of it, not just superficially, but with real acknowledgement of the patterns and their responsibility. That's huge, she responded. How do you feel about it? Cautiously optimistic, I replied after consideration. They seem sincere, but patterns that deep don't change overnight. I need to see consistent effort before I fully reinvest emotionally. Over the following months, my parents demonstrated that effort through small but meaningful actions. They respected my communication boundaries, never pushing for more contact than I initiated. They sent occasional text messages about their lives without expectation of immediate response. My father emailed articles related to my professional interests with thoughtful comments, while my mother sent birthday and holiday cards that acknowledged our difficult history while expressing hope for healing. 4 months after our dinner, I invited them to meet Sarah properly over lunch in Milwaukee. The meeting went better than anticipated, with my parents showing genuine interest in her work as a clinical research coordinator and treating her with the respect I had always deserved but rarely received from them. They're really trying, Sarah observed afterward. It's like meeting completely different people than the ones you described from your childhood. Crisis has a way of clarifying what matters, I replied. I think Dad's heart attack forced them to reevaluate everything, including the family dynamic they had normalized for so long. By the time Sarah and I became engaged the following spring, our relationship with my parents had evolved into something cautiously optimistic. We were not close in the traditional sense, but we were building something new based on mutual respect rather than obligation. They attended our engagement party alongside Sarah's family, the two sides interacting with a civility that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. Amanda remained notably absent from all family gatherings, having moved to Seattle after Portland didn't work out. According to my mother's careful updates, she continued to struggle with employment stability and financial independence, though my parents had maintained their boundaries around financial support. They had offered to help her find therapy, which she had angrily rejected. "I feel sad for her," I admitted to Dr. Brenner during a session. "She never developed the skills to function without being the center of attention. That's not entirely her fault, given how she was raised." "Compassion for your sister shows tremendous growth," Dr. Brenner observed. "But remember that understanding the roots of her behavior doesn't mean you need to expose yourself to its effects." It was a balance I was still learning to navigate, maintaining compassion for the dysfunctional family system that had shaped all of us, while protecting myself from its harmful patterns. The journey wasn't linear, with occasional backsliding into old communication patterns that required gentle but firm correction. But the overall trajectory was positive, a slow rebuilding of relationships on healthier foundations. 1 year after my father's heart attack, our families gathered to celebrate Sarah's and my wedding at a charming venue overlooking Lake Michigan. My parents attended as honored guests, their presence a testament to the healing that had occurred. Amanda had been invited as an olive branch but declined with a curt message about prior commitments. Her absence felt more like relief than loss, a sign of how far I had come in my recovery. During the reception, my father approached me at a quiet moment, his expression solemn yet peaceful. "I want you to know something, Coleman. Watching you rebuild your life after what we did, seeing your capacity for forgiveness while maintaining healthy boundaries, it's taught me more about character than anything else in my life. I'm prouder of you than I have words to express, and deeply grateful for this second chance I don't deserve." His words touched something deep within me, a wound that had begun to heal but still carried tenderness. "Thank you for doing the work to make this possible," I replied honestly. "It means more than I can say." As Sarah and I departed for our honeymoon the following day, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment of genuine happiness. The pain of family rejection had nearly broken me, yet through that breaking had come a reconstruction of my identity and understanding of love. I had learned that family could be chosen as well as born, that boundaries were acts of self-respect rather than selfishness, and that forgiveness didn't require forgetting. Most importantly, I had discovered my own worth existed independently of others' ability to recognize it. The validation I had spent decades seeking from my parents had ultimately come from within myself, supported by the genuine love of chosen family and friends who saw me clearly. While reconciliation with my parents brought healing, it was no longer the measure of my value or happiness. Life continues to evolve, with its complex mixture of joy and challenge. Sarah and I are building our own family now, conscious of the patterns we want to break and the healthier ones we hope to establish. My relationship with my parents maintains its careful balance of connection and boundaries, growing slowly towards something that may never be conventional, but is authentic and mutually respectful. Amanda remains distant by her choice, occasionally reconnecting with dramatic needs before disappearing again when her demands aren't met. I've made peace with the likelihood that she may never develop the self-awareness necessary for genuine relationship, while keeping my door cautiously open should that change. If you're facing family rejection or struggling with difficult family dynamics, know that your worth is not determined by others' ability to recognize it. Building boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for healthy relationships. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to step back and create a life filled with people who value you for who you truly are. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with family members who couldn't see your worth? How did you maintain your sense of self during difficult family situations? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve better. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength and healing on your own path to authentic relationships and self-worth.